guys, and welcome to another episode of Hey Sunshine. My name is Shani Timms, and today we're going to be diving into all things psychic development with Eloise Fielke. So, Eloise is my coach, my psychic mentor, and amongst an array of talents and gifts, she's an intuitive, a psychic medium, a psychic development teacher, kinesiologist, developing shamanic ceremonialist, and a spirit weaver. She's also a lover of cats, so if we hear a few meows throughout the podcast today, do not be alarmed. And most of all, she is a lover of all things spirit and woo-woo. So Eloise and I, we sort of ran in similar circles growing up, and I actually stumbled across her work. I think it was last year when I was looking for a psychic coach and mentor. And as soon as I saw her smiling face, she looked familiar for one, but I just thought, yep, this is the girl who's going to really take me on a journey with my psychic gifts and just allowing everything to sort of unfold. And she has just been the most incredible teacher so far. So Eloise, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Shani. Thank you for your beautiful words and such a lovely introduction. And I just love working with you as well and having you in the course and in the group. So it's such a beautiful experience working with someone who has run in similar circles and, grown up in a similar place in Melbourne, etc. So
Yeah.
it's just amazing. And I love the way that spirit weaves together for these things to occur.
Yeah, it's going to be so good. And I'm really, really excited to hear more about your journey into the psychic world. And yeah, just really sort of piquing your brain. This podcast really is for anyone who is interested in psychic development or maybe doesn't know much about it and wants to know a little bit more. Or if you are sort of involved in this space, like just even hearing about your journey and sort of like hearing about all the things that sort of led you to where you are today. And you're so well versed in your studies, like hearing about all your studies, which I'm sure we're going to dive into, has just been amazing. So just to open up this conversation, this container, I really want to know from you, what does magic mean to you, Eloise?
Magic to me, it's the current that underpins all life. So I see magic as spirit, and I see spirit as the essence of all life, the essence of all creation, the essence that's within all of us as humans as well. Because I do strongly believe that we are spirits in these human bodies, having these human experiences. But after this life, we go back to spirit, back to the creator, and then choose the next life, etc. And so essentially I see magic and spirit as really similar energies that just bring so much fullness and beautiful energy and connection to life. Because without magic, for me, there was, and I'm not sure if this is the same for you, Shani, and without that spiritual connection, I always felt there was something missing. Even when I was younger, I didn't know how to put any words to it when I was younger, but I just felt that there was an aspect that wasn't being nurtured. And when I found myself delving into spiritual studies in the different areas, it really helped to bring in that whole picture and that fulfillment of that aspect that was so often forgotten about.
Yeah, I totally feel you. And so similar to you, all my life, I was like, what is missing? Like, is it the place that I live? Is it a person? But really it's that connection to spirit. And what I sort of liken that sort of that longing or that feeling like something's missing, it's actually an energetic cord between you and that thing that gets shorter and shorter and shorter as you sort of go through life until you find that thing. So yeah, I totally relate to that. And thank you for opening up this conversation in such a beautiful way. So I really I know we've spoken about growing up in similar circles, but I really want for the listeners just to get an understanding of your background, how you sort of grew up, and how did you sort of go down this path to psychic development?
Yeah, this is a huge one. So essentially, I find that most people in this world feel a similar way, most people in the spiritual area. But for me, I definitely felt like a bit of the black sheep of the family, just a little bit different or a bit more woo-woo or into different things. And so that was kind of a theme for me growing up. And one of my teachers actually speaks about really understanding why we were drawn to this path, why we were drawn to looking for more. My teacher, Sharon Bolt from Shamanic Energy Training, and it was such a great awareness of going, oh wow, when I was younger and feeling like the black sheep in my family and at school, etc., I was really looking for belonging and community and connection and people that understood me. But that wasn't something I was able to articulate or put into words when I was younger, but it was just a feeling that was around, feeling different in a sense, or that my interests were different, or the way I thought or lived life was a little bit different. And when I was younger, it didn't feel like it was in a good way, if that makes sense. Now I'm like, yes, let's celebrate uniqueness and difference and the things that make us us. But yeah, it was that energy of, oh, I don't fully know where I fit in. And in that sense, I also grew up around animals. So I, as Shani's mentioned, I just love animals. And they were one place where I really felt at home and like I fit in. So animals are, my favorite thing in the whole wide world. And so that's been a beautiful aspect of this work as well, coming back to, oh wow, all animals read energy. So really connecting on that level as well. And then I will say I ran from my emotions a lot when I was younger. I find most of us, it's starting to change now in today's age and society, but in our generation, Shani, and older generations as well, we weren't really taught when we were younger how to process and deal with our emotions. And so I definitely found myself running from my emotions all the time, partying,
I was
going
gonna
out
say, I'm
all the
like, what does that
time.
look like? Like, is it, yeah, is it
Yeah,
the partying? It's the going out, the alcohol. Like, we have different
yeah,
ways of expressing it when we're going through like our childhood and our teens.
100%. So it was definitely the partying, the festivals, the going out all the time, working all the time, all that sort of stuff. And I do, when I look back, notice that it was just that staying busy so I could stay away from my emotions, away from the stillness, away from the tuning in to who I really was. And I find we put so many masks up and on. And so for me, that was the party girl, the fun, outgoing person that was always doing things, or the workaholic. And so they're masks that I put on to give me a sense of identity, because I was still running from who I really was, or even my emotions. Because when we don't process our stuff and our emotions and patterns and things from the past, we can really try to run from that, so to speak, and just find a different identity. So that was a big part of my journey, was going down, I don't want to say a darker path, but a path that wasn't truly meant for me, if that makes sense. But I will say it did lead me to where I am now. And so, obviously it was meant for me in some way, shape, or form. But when I was in that space, I was like, this is my life. I'm just going to travel. I'm going to party. I'm going to go to clubs till I'm 70. And so that was my aspirations and goals. And, now looking back, I can see that served a purpose, but it's not where I was meant to go. And so when I was 21, I used to travel quite a bit, and I was in India, and I got really, really sick, contracted a few parasites. They couldn't find them for a while. A lot of people listening to this, I'm sure, have, gone on that journey themselves as well, or heard of friends that have gone to India, gotten parasites, gone on a big health journey. And so when I came back home after that, I had chronic fatigue for a couple of years and was bedbound. And in that period, that's when all the masks had to start coming off, because I couldn't party, and I couldn't go to festivals, and I couldn't work, and I couldn't travel and do all the things that I was doing that made me feel like me, that made up my identity and who I was. So it was a huge ego death, so to speak, because I was like, who am I without all this stuff? And that search for meaning with, that energy we were speaking about before, Shani, in terms of when we're younger and just feeling different, but not sure how to put words to that. That search for meaning came on quite strongly when it was all stripped back. And that search for who am I beneath all of this, without all of this. So that
Can
was
I
a
ask
huge journey.
a question
Yeah.
on that? So, when you're in this weird stage of like, you've done all the internal work and you're at this stage where you're like, cool, I'm really happy with the internal, but then you're going out to those places where they're used to the old Eloise. How did you really navigate those times of where you feel internally like a totally different person, but you're having to show up externally potentially in the old Eloise way? So how did you sort of, maybe perhaps for someone going through this stage of shedding the old, how did you navigate that time?
Yeah, that this is a really great question and something that it took me a long time to grapple with, Shani. Literally for the first 2 years when I was going through my process and, the dark underworld of the journey and dark night of the soul, so to speak, I actually just hid. I did not know what to do and I did not have the energy anyway to get out of bed and go to these things and see those people. So my friendship group became really, really small. So I had that period of going deep within to allow the shifts, to allow the sadness and the grief of letting go of who I was to come through. And then after I started properly processing those emotions and accepting that this is how I am now, and starting to embrace these different parts of myself, that's when I noticed the empowerment come back. And in that sense, I would go out and see people and I would be different, but it's strange to navigate because you've really got to watch yourself and stepping back into your old dynamics and patterns and identities that you share with certain groups or people or the world when you have shifted, because there's almost that expectation to fill that dynamic. So I really had to watch myself, and I actually felt really almost anxious at times going out after that experience because I'm like, oh, how am I going to be received? How do I even interact? Because I don't actually know what I'm like in these spaces as the new me or more me. And so it was a bit of a teething process. Sometimes it would feel really uncomfortable and I could tell that I just didn't fit anymore in those places. And I had to just accept that. And then at other times, there is still, there was friends and friendship groups that there's still that resonance with in different ways and on different levels. And that's when, for me, I noticed, and it might sound a little bit harsh and direct, but this is how it showed up for me, was I noticed where the party friends were and where the true connections were. And I really had to accept that. As much as I didn't want to, I had to accept that and allow for that distinction and going, okay, I love this person, but we really connect over partying and what we used to do. And that just doesn't connect with me anymore. And so open to connection in the future, but I'm not going to step back into that role.
100%.
And so I really had to consciously choose that. Whereas there's other connections where I'm like, yep, we have these other hobbies together, these other connections, and there's a level of depth there.
Yeah.
And so I find that in those connections, the new me was quite embraced as well. It was just like, okay, this is just what we do together now. But it was a big process.
I think that's a sign of a true friendship. Like true friendships able to not weather the storms, but allow to someone to grow into their fullness and their authenticity without judgment, without shaming. It's like, I'm here for you and all of you, however that looks like, the lows, the highs. And I did like totally resonate with the party friends. Like a lot of my friends who were party friends in Melbourne, they were there for a period of time, but they're not there for the long haul of my life. And that's okay. And maybe they might go through some shifts and really step into their authentic selves as well. As you said, we might connect. And I just want to touch on a really beautiful point that you said. It's not a new me, it's the real me. And it's really just like peeling back the layers of programming and like years of masks and just allowing the fullness and the authenticity of us. So yeah, I really want to honor you and like celebrate you for stepping into that. And I think as well, so many people stepping into this space, you're actually shining a light on the path and the process and allowing others to do the same. Because it's scary when you feel like you're the only one going through these shifts, but you're actually sort of like lighting the way and just showing that it is possible and it's okay to change, you know? So
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really beautiful outline of like your upbringing and the party days, the glory days, whatever that is. But so tell me about like when your psychic gifts, when that sort of really started to unravel, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so for me, it actually showed up, and this is going to be really sound really contradictory, but it showed up during chronic fatigue because my body was so incredibly sensitive to everything around it that I strongly believe, and Shani, you've heard me say this a million times, the outer reflects the inner and vice versa. So when my physical senses were so incredibly heightened and sensitive to the outside world, obviously my psychic senses were getting a bit stronger and coming to the forefront a bit more as well. And so I did notice that lines start to blur, so to speak, where I would feel my stuff really deeply, but then I would feel other people's stuff without realizing it because that psychic sense was switching on as well. And so during that process, I didn't realize that that's what was happening. My ears were sensitive. Was seeing things in a different way, and seeing people's auric fields, but I didn't realize at the time. But it was actually through the chronic fatigue and the big health process. And then during that dark night of the soul, so to speak, I was definitely looking for that deeper meaning and was led to my current teacher, Sharon Bolt, who was doing healing sessions at the time. And so she was working with me on the chronic fatigue. And I was led to their school, so Shamanic Energy Training and the Temple of Shamanic Magic. And they teach Qigong and energy building. And that was exactly what I needed when my energy was so low. So Qigong was kind of my entry point, so to speak, into this world. And it really, really helped because when I started stepping into this work and finding my path, that's when the chronic fatigue started to shift as well. So it was a pretty interesting recovery where I was like, wow, I can see the pattern that's played out when
Yeah.
I embrace my true self. The fatigue started to shift, the passion for life came back. But that wouldn't have happened without that huge process and being in
Yeah.
bed for a couple of years, etc.
It's
And
interesting
so then,
when you bless the thing that broke you down. It's like, for me, I had like bad skin and gut health issues and like candida and parasites, similar to you. And a lot of
yeah,
people who they need to, well, they don't need to, but like we go through this big rock bottoming to then springboard us up. And it's almost like a massive sort of alarm bell, like, can I get your attention? There's some work to do here. So yeah, I love that whole story. And even how you found Sharon, like it's amazing these people who come into your life at the exact point and the exact time to then really help you take you to your next level.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
so I want to quickly talk about this is more of like psychic foundation sort of stuff, but like, so can you talk us through the clairs of the psychic senses, and then I want to go into like what was the strongest one for you through this sort of like spiritual breakthrough for you?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So for me, I'll first go into the clairs. Essentially, we've got clairsentience connected to the solar plexus, which is our psychic sense of feeling. And then we've got clairaudience, which is connected to the throat, and it's our psychic sense of hearing. Then clairvoyance, our psychic sense of seeing, which is connected to the third eye. They're the three main ones that I teach on. And that my teacher taught on as well. So I pass on his teaching. So I also really want to honor my psychic development teacher, Benjamin Veens, who I was led to through a series of synchronicities at the start of my journey as well. And that really shaped my work and who I am. So he's amazing. And then from there, you've still got some other psychic senses that aren't as common to focus on for psychic development because it can be a bit more ambiguous, but they can come in. So you've got claircognizance, the psychic sense of knowing. Then you've got clairgustation, which is the psychic sense of taste. And then clairolfactory, the psychic sense of smell. So they're the main ones, which correlate with the five senses as well, but you've also got the knowing in there. And then my journey with those senses, the way my teacher Benjamin taught was really honing in on one at a time, because then you're actually giving those senses a chance to open up and for you to connect with them instead of just automatically defaulting to your dominant one every time. So for me, the dominant one was actually clairvoyance because it's an interesting little side story, but getting better from chronic fatigue involved some brain rehearsal and self-hypnosis. And so with that, I was actually using my clairvoyant muscle and I had no idea. I didn't realize. So when I stepped into development, of course, it was a bit more developed. And that actually helped me get better as well. So it's crazy the things that connect in that way. But through development, I actually really strengthened my clairaudience, which was my absolute weakest level. I would struggle to connect with anything, and that's when I decided to focus on that level. It really, really expanded, because I am a firm believer and proof of, if you want to expand a certain psychic level, you practice on that level, you practice those techniques, and you read on that level. Because I am a firm believer, and Shani's heard me say this
Yeah.
many times, we are all psychic,
Yeah.
right? So we all have a connection to all of the senses. People aren't just clairvoyant or just clairsentient and that's it, and that's all it is for life. We actually all have the psychic abilities of all of those senses. We might have dominant ones, but we can actually pick and choose. I want to focus on this one and expand that energy and practice on that level and open that up. And so that's what I chose to do consciously with clairaudience, and I just love it so much.
Yeah.
And so I love empowering my students as well by going, you guys get to choose, right?
100%. And I think like so many people going into your course would really resonate with that idea, or even some might be surprised. Like everyone's born psychic, but then it's like it's life and it's programs and it's patterning that sort of like close us down in a way that we're not as tuned in as we can be. But then it's like through work such as yours and really opening up in a steady way, we can tap back into that innate wisdom and that innate gift with us. And like I
Yeah.
know for me, I've always had this, I think it's claircognizant, where it's like I just know things. Like it'll be you know, in dating, it was a big thing for me. Like I would be going on dates with guys, it'd be going well. And then I'd like hug a guy goodbye. And then I would just know in my body, like every cell would be like, you're never going to see him again. And my
Yeah.
mind's like, what? Why? Like, you know, we're going to see him again. And my body's like, nope, we're not. Like, it's just that deep knowing. So I suppose for anyone listening, are there any sort of like little signs for maybe like the top three clairs of like how it might be showing up for them in their everyday, but they might not realize it?
Yes, a huge one is clairsentience, because people pick up so much more energy than they realize, especially sensitive individuals. And a lot of people are more sensitive than they realize as well, because they're used to just going, well, that's mine and that's mine, and now I'm feeling all this stuff. So, an example of how clairsentience can show up in your everyday life is, say you went for coffee with a friend that was really, really anxious and stressed about some stuff going on in her life. And that morning before coffee, you were feeling fine. You're like, oh, I've got some stuff going on, but I'm not feeling anxious or overly stressed. And then you go home from coffee with that stressed, anxious friend, and then you're feeling really anxious and stressed. Most people aren't going to stop and consciously go, oh, I saw that friend, and connect the dots around what's going on energetically. But in saying that, it will show up as if it's our own. So we start getting stressed and anxious about our own stuff. So that's where it's really easy for us to take it on board and go, well, now I'm just stressed and anxious, instead of looking at the energetics of it. And we can do that in a whole myriad of ways with so many different people and energies and everything. And so it's such a vast area, but that's just one small example of how
Yeah.
it can happen. Or say you're really deeply connected to a family member and they are halfway across the world, you know, in another country, and your family member really hurts their left knee, and suddenly that knee starts hurting or aching for you, and you're like, where did this come from, what's going on? But it might be because you're connected to that family member, you're deeply connected, or you're corded, and so you might pick up those energies as well. So a lot of this work is learning to reflect on what's going on energetically, so you can connect the dots and recognize, oh, okay, that's how my clairsentience might be showing up. Another one with clairaudience is actually, and we all experience this, so everyone is psychic, more psychic than they know, but receiving songs. Anytime we have a song pop in and we haven't physically heard it, but it just comes in. Sometimes you wake up with that song in your head. You haven't heard it in months, right? But it's just there. That is psychic information, because that's one of the clairaudient levels that we work on as well. And there's specific ways to interpret those songs. But that is clairaudient information coming through. And so you can't get the song out of your head and it keeps being the same, 10 seconds,
Yeah.
two lines over and over again.
And you're like,
You're
what is
like,
it telling me? You know? Yeah.
100%. You're like, someone play it, get it
Yeah.
out of my head.
And you brought up
So,
a good one the other day, and you said, when you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my God, I've got to, go to the post office. That's also can be spirit sometimes talking to you and giving you a little reminder of something you might need to do or something that you've forgotten about. So I think
100%.
after hearing a few of these things, like, if you're listening to this, maybe just start to tune in and sit with these little things that just pop in that you think are a coincidence or random, and start to bring a bit of inquiry to like what you're actually receiving and just seeing like, oh, is this actually mine? Having discernment around what you're feeling, and also, yeah, what you're hearing. Is this actually a message from spirit? Is this, just my ego talking? Who knows? But it's fun to play around with it. And I feel like this is actually a really good segue into something that like totally surprised me. It's psychic hygiene. And I remember first reading about it with you, and it made so much sense. Like, we wash our hands after we go to the bathroom. Why don't we, sage and bring in some psychic hygiene practices after we actually connecting with someone? So can you talk a little bit more to that idea about how maybe some tips about bringing psychic hygiene into our life?
Yes, yes. So, as energetic beings, we pick up so much energy and so much more than we realize, like our conversation we just had about seeing a friend and then picking up their emotions and energy. So it is, like Shani spoke about, a similar analogy to we have showers, we wash our hands, we do all these physical things for our physical hygiene. So energetic hygiene, when you're opening up to the world of energy and the weird and wacky world of woo woo, it's actually just as important. And so some of my favorite little easy things are working with essential oils to just put them over your field and just notice which one you need, which one you're drawn to as well, because that's an energy that can completely shift your energy, especially when you comb it through your field. So that's a great way to just shift some stagnant energy, as well as smudging, as Shani spoke about. So saging or working with a plant that you wish to work with for cleansing your energy, because that can really help to cleanse our field. And then the other one that is my all-time favorite, and I tell my students to do it multiple times a week minimum, is bathing or swimming in the ocean, swimming in the river, or if you're having a bath, preferably a salt bath, because salt is incredibly cleansing. But it's the idea that when we dunk our head under a body of water, we're allowing that water to wash through our energy centers, our chakras, so our main energy system up our spine. And then that also ricochets out through our associated auric field bodies as well. So it's such a great way to cleanse, as well as any of the four elements. And this is more going into the shamanic work that I've studied with Sharon. Any of the four elements can be cleansing in their own right as well. And so in that instance, you're working with the element of water to cleanse your field, because the elements are so cleansing and they are what make up the base of our existence on this planet and our reality.
That's, yeah, super powerful. And I think it's been hard up here. I haven't been able to go for ocean swims because we've had the floods here in northern rivers. But yeah, just using water and really intentionalizing, like even when you're having a shower, just like intentionalizing, let this cleanse my aura, all of that stuff is so powerful, and it's made such a difference. So, and let me swing back to last year. So last year for me, as I was really opening up to my psychic gifts and senses, I had so much fear. And it was literally, I laugh, it was like 12 months of my nervous system being rattled as hell, because I was opening up quite rapidly, but I didn't have these psychic practices or principles until I found you, of course. So I think for somebody who is going through maybe a psychic awakening or opening up their senses even more, can you talk about maybe that fear aspect? Is there anything that we can really do to sort of like dispel the fear? And perhaps sort of if you've got any stories about you sort of really stepping into the work, what helped you?
Yeah, thank you. This is also a great question. So, with the fear, there's so many facets, right? I'll touch on what we just spoke about. The psychic hygiene is really empowering. And I'm sure you've experienced that as well, Shani, because suddenly you have these tools that they actually help to shift the energy that you've taken on. So it's not as scary anymore. It's not as, oh my God, this thing's happened. What am I going to do about it? I don't want to feel overwhelmed for the rest of the day. when I've picked up this energy. And so it's really empowering to have the right tools, protections, psychic hygiene, energy management techniques to work with, so that you can feel empowered and on top of your energy and have something to support you when you're feeling a bit ungrounded or you've picked up some energy. So that's one part of the puzzle. But some of this can actually date back to when we are kids, right? Especially people that are drawn to this work. Sometimes they don't even recall or realize until they're deep in psychic development. But often people drawn to this work have had big experiences when they were younger, because I'm a firm believer that all babies and animals just read energy purely. And you can see that when a baby goes to someone and they're like, no, I don't want to be around this person, they just cry. And then they go to someone else like, oh, I'm happy now. So there's that aspect. Same with dogs, right? Dogs barking at random people and they're like, no, this person, I don't want to be around them. So there's that aspect. And then I believe kids mostly read energy, but then when we start, you know, in the schooling system and through different societal constructs and the way our culture is conditioned, there isn't much space for us as kids to stay deeply connected to our intuition and our energetic perception and way of experiencing the world, because it's not really the norm or what's taught or encouraged and nurtured. I'm noticing that starting to shift now, because there's such a beautiful wave of mothers that I'm seeing come through that are like, I really want to cultivate that connection. But at the same time, it is important for kids to still be grounded, doing physical human things and not just studying energy. So there's a place for it all. But I notice with mainstream society and culture and the schooling system, it's almost still a bit taboo or shunned, this sort of work and energetic work and spiritual work and the idea that, you know, spirits could be real. So there is that aspect. So we do start to shut down as kids because, like, well, that's not normal. So then sometimes, and for a lot of us and a lot of my students as well, we've had experiences where, you know, you might have seen a ghost when you're going to sleep or a spirit in your room and it's scary, but you don't, as a kid, feel like you have anyone to talk to about it. And you don't really have the support and help that you need. And so it is a bit scary because you don't actually have the tools to cope with that as a kid, you know? Even seeing that as a psychic development teacher, seeing a physical ghost in the room and you're like, wow, okay, that's scary. I can't even imagine how a poor 5-year-old would feel with that experience.
And I think, or even adults, like adults have a lot of fear and shame around voicing this sort of stuff. Like I know a lot of my work last night, sort of dispelling the fear, was actually childhood stuff, but past life stuff as well. Like actually being in past lives, we were persecuted for speaking up about this woo-woo stuff or sharing our voice or, you know, sharing connections with spirit or seeing a ghost. So there's also that aspect of things as well. Did you have you done any past life work into, like, you know, what you were in a past life and how that might be impacting your journey today?
Yeah, it's definitely come up in the past. But one of my teachers, Sharon, I love her perspective of it, and this has really landed for me recently, of really focusing on the physical and our childhood stuff and, you know, our relationship with our parents and societal conditioning and programs and patterns and beliefs, etc., that we've taken on before going back into the past life stuff. But I do strongly believe that can shape this as well. I also believe that it might come from ancestral stuff too. So there can be the past life experiences where, you know, you may have been a witch and burned at the stake or had, you know, difficult experiences when this work has been frowned upon quite extremely in the past. So there is that aspect that can come in that I believe can be beneficial to work on when we're working on it from all levels, the physical, the past life, the ancestral, etc. But also I do believe that a lot of us probably have ancestors that were punished for working with spirit or their gifts or anything magical, because, you know, that is actually history that's written in society. What a lot of women were punished for, you know, even just making herbal concoctions to support people, you know, what people would be as herbalists now, that people were killed for that in the past. And so there can be that ancestral connection as well of our ancestors experiencing that punishment. So that can run through. I do believe in that, those patternings, those conditionings, those traumatic experiences for our ancestors can sometimes be passed down. And I believe there's a huge need for ancestral work around this as well. Things like family constellations are great ways to work on this. But essentially, that can be passed down to us. And so sometimes that fear isn't even coming from 5-year-old us going, oh my God, I saw a ghost and it was so scary and I didn't know what to do. But it can actually be coming from a deeper place of going, oh, this isn't safe. The other thing to note as well is the way religion, and this might be a bit controversial, but religion and the church has framed spirituality as, the devil's work or this, that, and the other. When really I see it as it's all just different terminology for the same things, because at the church they have God and faith in God, and in spirituality you might connect with God as well in your own way, or you might connect with goddess or spirit or whatever you wish to call it, that is actually just that universal power. So there's that aspect, but there was quite a lot of negative connotations about this spiritual side around the church, etc. And that was quite shunned. And so I actually see in some students or people around them, when they step into this work, it can bring up for loved ones or their parents, etc., those conditionings and beliefs from the church of going, that's the devil's work. If you're going to study mediumship, that's the devil's work. And so that might not even just be ancestral, but that can be directly said to us as a kid or even now. And when it's a loved one or a parent or someone you look up to and have that deep love and care for and connection with, it can really impact us, even if we don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, no, that's my thing. But there can be that underlying subconscious aspect of, oh, I'm not going to be accepted in my family unit if I do this work. So there's a huge area there as well that I still see playing out now.
I was having a chat with my grandpa about, I think it would have been about 6 months ago, and I was sort of saying that I've been dabbling in this work, and I obviously drip feed my grandparents stuff because I don't want to bombard them with this whole woo-woo chat. And I remember saying something about connecting with a friend who passed away through mediumship, and he was literally, you could see his face just went white, and he's Anglican and like very religious, and he just went, oh my God, he's like, that's the work of the devil. You're playing with fire there. And I remember afterwards sitting with it and being like, oh my God, like I was a little bit shocked, but also like, I could feel that part of me coming up. Like, I don't want to, do something that my grandpa isn't proud of or anything like that. But then I think it is such an old way of thinking, and we are moving forward in the world, and we do need new things to move us forward. And I want to do a whole podcast on spirituality versus religion, because I had a lot of shame about showing up, in my spiritual self, because I didn't want people to pigeonhole me and think I'm being religious or too, Catholic or Christian, because that's not me. And I think that's an element of spirituality, but there's just so much to it. So anyway, let's bookmark that for another
Yes.
podcast.
Yes, that's for another chat.
Thing. But there's so much to it. And I suppose, like, for listeners now sort of thinking like, we've really piqued their interest in the psychic development world. What are sort of some ways that they could really start tapping into their psychic senses? Obviously, the first way, start working with you because you're incredible. But maybe what are some other ways they could really start tapping into their psychic senses?
Yeah, so I actually love teaching this work from a really grounded perspective, especially before stepping into psychic development. And so I see it as the energy centers, the chakras, are deeply connected to the psychic senses. And so I like to look at it from a perspective of, if you want to open up your clairsentience, start working on a really grounded way with your clairsentience in terms of your solar plexus and your psychic sense of feeling. So when you work with your solar plexus, understanding the themes that governs in your life, such as your identity, such as how you show up in the world, your connection to your masculinity. And just observing what's going on in that area, because that will already show you, okay, is that energy center blocked? Is there some stuff there to move through, etc.? And so I love working with the colors of the energy centers as well. So the solar plexus is connected to yellow. So the more you connect with yellow and wear yellow, that really helps, as well as from a really grounded perspective. If you want to start being able to feel things on a psychic level with your clairsentience, then you have to be able to feel your own stuff. So if you're someone that's really emotionally blocked, I highly recommend, to get things moving on that level, actually spending time connecting to your emotions. And if you're someone that kind of runs from them, then actually putting space aside for it. I know it sounds counterintuitive because you're like, but you can't force them. But if you don't create space and you're someone that is always busy or running from them, then there isn't going to be that space anyway. So even just having that 15 minutes a day where you're like, I'm just going to sit and breathe and see if there's anything that wants to come up. So it can be from that really practical perspective that then you're feeling your own stuff, so that reflects externally. You can deepen your psychic sense of feeling. And then same with the throat energy center for clairaudience, the psychic sense of hearing. So working with the color blue, but also the throat's all about communication as well as listening, especially when we're going to clairaudience in the ears. So on that level, really, really, really dropping into deep listening of other people when they're speaking, especially if you're someone that talks a lot, then I highly encourage nurturing that listening aspect where, you know, we always want to jump in and go, oh, but what about that thing? Or even just agreeing and those sorts of things. And there's such a beauty in just listening and not even giving feedback or saying yes, I agree, etc., but just listening. And so that's been something I've really been working on cultivating as well, because I think it's such a beautiful quality of the throat energy center. But it can go the other way if you're someone that's really quiet and you don't like speaking up in front of groups or people or things like that. Actually challenging yourself to speak up a bit more and to use your voice and your communication, because that will start moving things with the throat energy center, and then that will start moving things with your clairaudience. And then the easiest one for clairvoyance, the psychic sense of seeing at the third eye, is meditation, visualization, because you're actually using the same muscle that you use for clairvoyance when you're meditating. And so, as I said earlier on, when I was brain rehearsing, which is essentially just the scientific version of manifestation and visualization,
Yeah.
because I was doing that so often, it was really opening up my clairvoyance, because it's the same muscle. It's for your subjective clairvoyance, because there's different levels in the psychic senses as well that we split up. And so that will really start to switch on your psychic sense of seeing the more you meditate. And so it's great because it brings in that beautiful aspect of self-observation and self-reflection and being able to sit still and sit with your stuff and mindfulness, but it also can help you expand your psychic senses. So it's such a great practice that's so multifaceted.
I think all of those like are just so easy to implement in a day-to-day practice. Like you could do 20 minutes in the morning and really sort of work through all your different psychic senses and start to strengthen them one by one. And what I really love, and I want to touch on my journey with you as well, just quickly. But what I really love about this course that you offer, the Psychic Foundations, it's not just Psychic Foundations, it's actually you're going through 6 months of personal development and growth, because it's when you're working, as you're saying, clearing all the chakras and really stepping into your authentic truth and power. It's not just opening up your gifts, it's opening up this full channel into your authentic self. So I think that's what I've really loved most about working with you is, one, you make it so logical, but two, it's tied into actually like how can we grow as a human as well and clear our own shit and work through our own shit. So yeah, if you didn't catch that at the start, I've been studying with Eloise for about, we're probably coming up to like 3 or 4 months now.
Yeah, I
are we?
think we're in month 4 now.
Yeah. And so it's once a week we sit in a group call, and you're just so good at sort of like dispelling the jargon and making it really, really understandable and breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. I think the best thing that I've loved is like, anyone can really tap into this work, and you can open up your psychic senses, and you don't need to be this mystic woo woo, sitting in a robe levitating. Like, you can be a normal person, and you don't even need to use it in your work. You can use it in your day-to-day life. So I know that we're doing the Psychic Foundations level 1 at the moment, but do you have something coming up in the next couple of months?
Yes, I do. So I usually have them every few months. And so I've got another level one starting. When is it? I think it's mid-August. And yeah, I love what you mentioned about that, because essentially it is grounded psychic development, because I try and bring it in a
Yeah.
really practical, logical, grounded way, because so much of the courses and development in this field can sometimes be quite out there or quite woo woo, and then we struggle to integrate it into our everyday lives and actually use what we're learning, because sometimes it's, ambiguous, or just see what comes. And so I'm a very logical person as well, and so people might not expect that because I teach this work, but that's why I love teaching it in such a logical, specific way. And that way was actually passed down to me from Benjamin Veens. And so that's how I learnt, and then how I was taught to teach as well. And so I really want to honor that, because it's just such an amazing template for readings and template for working with the senses, that there's no more guessing or just going, let's see what happens there. It's actually symbology and aspects where you can go, oh yeah, that fits with this, and that makes sense. Awesome. So it's a very, very grounded and logical way of doing it, as well as the self-development is so important, because if we don't work through our own stuff and our projections and our patterns and know ourselves, then some of the information that we interpret will just be straight up projections, right? So the self work is so important, but often overlooked in the psychic development
Definitely.
field.
And
Yeah.
even the fact that it's a 6-month course, like, it's like you're not just, opening us all up and dropping these bombshells and being like, cool, figure it out. We're actually opening up our psychic senses in a not controlled, but like in a really responsible way. So we're not going to be bombarded, and we're learning about psychic hygiene, and we're learning about actually like bringing back empowerment, that we can control this. It doesn't control us. So yeah, I literally, I will speak or sing your praises until the cows come home. I don't even know if that's the saying, but I'm coining it. um, but yeah, I just love the work you do and the magic you bring to the world. And for anyone's listening, I really hope that you've taken something away from this, and just really start tapping into your unique power as a psychic, magic, mystic, who knows. But Eloise, I just want to thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for being on the Hey Sunshine podcast. And I'm sure I'll have you back on for many a podcast episodes in the future.
Yes, I would love that. We have many more topics to expand upon and dive into, but thank you so much, Shani, for having me on here as well. It's been such a joy, and a pleasure to chat with you and all things woo woo and psychic. So thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you. I just like to clap just to finish the thing.